My name is Yonah Seleti. I'm an invited speaker at this conference. My focus of work is on indigenous knowledge systems. And the aim of my contribution is how do we take seriously indigenous knowledge as a contributor to science and then science education.
What's your biggest challenge to that?
It's actually both the scientists and the non-scientists taking indigenous knowledge seriously as a knowledge domain, and also that it has its own paradigm, way of explaining, ways of knowing. And I think that that is normally a challenge. So they want to incorporate it into their ways of knowledge, and the two cannot fit. We need to look at indigenous knowledge and examine it on the basis of its own claims and its own ways of validating itself. And thereafter, we can then go into a comparison. What truths are being said? Now, my departure point is that there are many truths. There can't be one truth. And we need to tell all the truths that we know. And they will add to the totality of the truths. And to that extent, I see indigenous knowledge not only as contributing to the truth, but that it has the potential to transform what we know, because it still has an orientation towards being compassionate, being people-centered, towards being generous. And we need those values in a very competitive and cruel world that we live in.
What are some of the methods that you've found to incorporate a kind of a method of incorporated IK?
All right. Now, as I work for the Department of Science and Technology. The Department of Science and Technology has agencies such as research councils, the National Research Foundation, universities. And so what we have aimed to do is how do we take IKS into these institutions? Beginning with universities, we're using a South African Research Chair Initiative by putting chairs in the universities so they become a dynamic center to spread this knowledge. Then we have a second concept which the department uses, centers of excellence. So we're establishing a center of excellence between the universities of Venda, Limpopo and Northwest, and it would include also UNISA and the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And the purpose of this is to begin to interface in the curriculum. So we have a Bachelor of Indigenous Knowledge Systems that will be rolled out from February at these three universities of Venda, Limpopo and Northwest Mafeking. And I think that's quite a change from the usual curricula. We want an indigenous knowledge only from within. In this particular case, it will be a 4-year degree. The 4th year will be spent in the community with knowledge holders as barefoot professors teaching. And I think that's quite a change, so that we can make the degree not only relevant, but also meaningful to the people in which they are working. How do they contribute and transform that landscape?
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be my next question in a way. It's one thing to study it, but there's so much value to it. How do you implement it?
Well, the other side of the work, especially let's look at the science councils. The science councils are in the business of producing knowledge which should lead into innovation. Right. We have taken as a part of our departure point 2 themes, food security and nutraceuticals, and also traditional medicine. So with the food security, we are identifying which of the foods we need to take through research, know what they are constituted, and then begin to look at how we produce them for the market. So if we're looking at rural development, we can actually begin to see how indigenous knowledge that is rooted in those communities, if it is used as a basis of their own development, can begin to generate economic activities. So we've begun on that. On traditional medicines, we have the Medical Research Council, the Council for Science and Industrial Research, and other universities beginning to research that. We have a bioprospecting platform. So we have potential leads in HIV, in TB, in diabetes. In diabetes, some of the claims are actually showing results better than insulin. but we have to go through the whole process. It's not a shortcut. So I think that we also are looking at indigenous knowledge as adding value to combating the known diseases, but also using that as a basis for benefits to the communities. So I think that there is quite some scope. If you have been in the main hall, you'll have seen that there are women with doing pottery and jewelry. That's also part of indigenous knowledge. So it's already generating economic activities, but also being studied as a science. How can we use that and improve it? So to a certain extent, we're beginning to be quite practical, getting to the ground, but this is just a beginning. We will need to find partners. Not only government can do this, we need partners in the private sector as well to come on board. And I think that's an important part of our work.
Okay. And last question, 10 years' time, where would you like things to be?
I would like to see a cosmeceutical industry based on indigenous products. I would like to see an African pharmaceutical industry based on African traditional medicines. I would like to see the improvement in the quality of rural dwellers through their own technologies, such as architecture, thatch technologies. Use what they know to have a better life for all. So I see a systemic shift where IKS would be respected because contributes to the world, but it will also be sustained because communities will live it and they will earn a living out of it.
So kind of compassion is inherent in IKS?
Because it's human-centered, because it's about community building, and it's not so competitive because you're working together in cooperatives. So it brings in that aspect of that. Now, in terms of the humane of the sciences, let's assume we do have an African-based theory of African traditional medicine. How does that influence the practice of medicine? Because part of the push is an impersonal approach to healing. Now, with indigenous traditional medicine, the human being and the restoration of that human being as a person holistically rather than as a chemical balance is important. And I think that we can contribute to a more humane society that is based on compassion and restoration.
That's great. Thank
My name is Yonah Seleti, and I appreciate this work with Invent Africa because it's a partnership in promoting the innovation from the grassroots level, and that's what indigenous knowledge is about. And all the best with your work.
Thanks.